right, let's get right into it. The way every single one of us who works in India thinks about Social Security, things like our PF, our gratuity, our insurance, all of that is about to change, like completely change. We're talking about a massive rewrite of the entire rule book. So just think about your job for a minute. Are you a full-time employee with a 9 to 5? Maybe you're a freelancer working on a project-by-project basis. Or maybe you drive for Ola or deliver for Zomato, or you're on a fixed-term contract. You know what? It actually doesn't matter. Because there's a new law in town, the Code on Social Security, and it's designed to bring absolutely everyone under one giant safety net. This is going to affect all of us, so you really need to know how. So you might be asking, what was wrong with the old system? Well, to put it really simply, it was a complete mess. India's social security system was this confusing jumble of different laws, some of them written decades ago for a totally different kind of workforce. I mean, imagine having 9 different remote controls just for one TV, right? And each one has its own weird buttons and rules. That's pretty much what companies and employees were dealing with. It was complicated, it was inefficient, and frankly, it left a whole lot of people out. And here's the fix. The new Code on Social Security takes all of those 9 separate laws and just squashes them into a single unified rulebook. Just look at that cleanup on the screen. From 9 different laws all the way down to 1. That is a huge simplification. Okay, now this is probably the biggest change of all. For the very first time ever, the law is officially recognizing and creating social security schemes for the modern workforce. We're talking about people who, until now, were pretty much left out in the cold. So first up, we've got gig workers. Think about a freelance designer, a consultant who's hired for just one specific project, or maybe a writer working on different assignments. They're not your typical employees, and now, finally, they are formally recognized by the law. And then you have platform workers. This is basically anyone who uses a digital app or a platform to find their work. So your Uber or Ola driver, the Swiggy or Zomato delivery partner, that urban company professional who comes to your house. Yep, they are all now considered platform workers. So what's the big picture here? Well, the code is basically just expanding this whole umbrella of who's covered. On one side, it's grouping all the traditional employees, full-time, contract, fixed-term, all together. But the real game changer is that it's creating a brand new legal category for gig, platform, and other unorganized workers, promising them social security for the very first time. That's huge. Right, let's talk about what you really want to know. The bottom line. How does this actually affect your salary slip, your take-home pay? This is where a really important new rule comes in, and trust me, it's going to impact every single person who earns a salary in this country. You ever look at your payslip and just wonder how your Provident Fund, your PF contribution is actually worked out? It's always a percentage of something called wages. Well, the definition of what counts as wages is about to get a major makeover. And this is the magic number that changes everything, 50%. This one simple figure is going to force a complete rethink of salary packages all across India. Okay, let's break this down nice and simple. The new code says that for things like your PF, your wages are your basic pay plus your dearness allowance. That's it. Everything else, your HRA, bonuses, whatever, that's all considered an exclusion. Now here's the rule. These exclusions cannot be more than half of your total pay. If they are, then any amount over that 50% line, it gets outed back to your wages, which means your PF contribution will be calculated on a much higher amount. So what does this look like in the real world? Well, to follow this 50% rule, a lot of companies are going to have to increase the basic pay part of your salary. This means your monthly PF contribution will go up, which is fantastic for your retirement savings. But there's a trade-off. Your monthly take-home salary might actually go down a little bit. Now, it's not just about the salary structure. The code also brings in some really important updates to other benefits you're probably familiar with, like your gratuity and maternity leave. This one is a total game changer. For decades, gratuity was always seen as this loyalty bonus you get for staying with a company for 5 years. But for someone on a contract, that was almost impossible to achieve. Well, not anymore. So here's what you need to remember. That 5-year service rule, it's gone for fixed-term employees. It's waived. So even if you're on a 1-year or a 2-year contract, you are now legally entitled to get a pro-rata gratuity when your contract ends. It's not a reward anymore. It's a benefit you've actually earned. The new code also strengthens benefits for families, which is great to see. It's making maternity laws way more inclusive. Now, those 26 weeks of paid leave extend to adoptive and commissioning mothers, too. On top of that, the rules for mandatory creche facilities have been made stronger, all aimed at making workplaces more supportive for everyone.
Now look, having a new law on paper is one thing, but making it a reality for over 400 million workers, that's a whole different ballgame. The code is incredibly ambitious, but whether it succeeds really depends on overcoming some very real challenges. You see, the biggest hurdle is just getting it done. Since labor is a state subject, all 30-plus states and union territories need to make their own rules to match the central code, and that is a slow process. Then there are these massive challenges like building the technology needed for online registration and just making sure that millions of gig and unorganized workers even know that these new benefits exist for them. And that's exactly why all the experts are pointing to one critical step. All the states need to get on the same page. To avoid this becoming another confusing patchwork system, there has to be a coordinated push. It's simple, really. A unified law needs unified action. So when you put it all together, the Code on Social Security is, without a doubt, a historic attempt to create a single, modern safety net for every single Indian worker. The vision is definitely there, but its success is really going to depend on how well it's put into practice, right there on the ground. It's a really bold vision, right? Trying to build a safety net that covers everyone, from the corporate office tower to the person delivering food on the city streets. But the big question remains. Is this truly the beginning of universal social security in India? Or is it just the first step on a very, very long and complicated road?
Hey there, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a crucial journey, really, into a law that's quietly yet profoundly reshaping the very fabric of work and protection for millions across India. We're talking about the Code on Social Security 2020. Now, this isn't just some dry piece of legislation. It's more like a blueprint for a new safety net. It touches everything, from your retirement savings and medical care to maternity benefits. And for the very first time, it's extending a hand to our growing army of gig and platform workers.
That's right.
So it's a real game changer. Affects how you work, how you're protected, and how businesses operate in this dynamic nation.
Indeed. The Code on Social Security, which was enacted back on September 28, 2020, isn't just a simple update to existing laws. Not at all. What's truly ambitious here is its scope and, well, its vision. It basically consolidates 9 previous, often fragmented labor laws into a single, unified framework.
9 laws into one.
Wow. Exactly. So our mission today is to, cut through the legal jargon, the extensive details, and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, insights from the core law and its draft rules. We'll explore what this means for you, whether you're an employer navigating new compliance, maybe an employee seeking better protection, or part of that rapidly expanding gig economy.
It's really about understanding how this code aims to formalize and streamline Social Security for India's incredibly diverse workforce.
That's right. So if you've ever thought about your Provident Fund, your PFF, or maybe your employee's state insurance, the ESI, or even just wondered how our delivery riders and cab drivers are finally getting a clearer path to Social Security, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We're going to unpack this pivotal legislation. Let's see how it aims to build a stronger, more inclusive safety net for India's workforce, making sense of a massive change that's still unfolding. So let's start with the grand vision here. This isn't just a small tweak, is it? What exactly is this code trying to achieve for a country like India? You're absolutely right. It's far from a small tweak.
Yeah.
The primary objective of the Code on Social Security 2020 is basically to create a uniform legal framework for a whole range of Social Security schemes across India. We're talking essentials like Provident Fund, that's your long-term savings, retirement fund,
Right.
pension benefits, various types of insurance, gratuity, the lump sum payment for long service, and, of course, maternity benefits to support working mothers. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it represents a systemic and, frankly, monumental effort to transition from a bewilderingly complex web of 9 separate laws into one streamlined system. The overarching goal, as they put it in the preamble, is to extend these vital protections to all employees and workers.
All employees and workers. That sounds broad.
It is. And that phrase signals a significant policy shift towards much wider, if not entirely universal coverage yet. It aims to bring the organized sector, the vast unorganized sector, and those emerging gig and platform sectors under a single, coherent Social Security umbrella.
9 laws condensed into one. That sounds less like a legislative update and more like, I don't know, untangling a really complicated knot.
That's a perfect analogy. A tangled knot, absolutely.
So what were these older laws? And crucially, why did they need such a massive overhaul now?
Well, before this code, India's social security landscape was a real patchwork, governed by all sorts of different laws. For instance, you had the Employees Provident Funds Act from 52 for retirement savings, the ESI Act from 48 for health benefits, the Maternity Benefit Act 61, Payment of Gratuity Act 72, even older ones like the Employees Compensation Act from 1923 for workplace injuries.
Wow, quite a history.
Exactly. And specific laws for unorganized workers, construction workers too. The challenge with these older laws was their fragmented nature. They often had different thresholds for applying diverse definitions for key terms like wages or employee.
Ha, so inconsistent.
Very inconsistent. And varying compliance requirements. This led to, well, administrative headaches for businesses operating across states, regulatory arbitrage where some could exploit loopholes, and most importantly, huge gaps in coverage. Millions of workers left without any safety net. This new code aims for simplification, better compliance, and, crucially, wider, more equitable coverage by unifying everything under one roof.
Okay, so the goal is definitely making things simpler and covering more people. But you mentioned wider, if not entirely universal coverage. Is it truly universal? Does it cover everyone now? Or are there still, some gaps?
That's a really important question, and it highlights a key distinction in the code's approach. While the legislative intent is broad, inclusive, aiming for all employees and workers, the framework, as it stands now, still keeps specific employee-based thresholds for its core schemes.
Okay, like what?
For instance, the Employees Provident Fund, the EPF, that still applies mainly to establishments with 20 or more employees. Similarly, Gratuity, Maternity Benefit, ESI, they generally apply to places with 10 or more employees. So this means while the code achieves a significant horizontal expansion, like bringing in gig and platform workers under a framework for the first time, which is huge,
Right.
It kind of falls short on what we might call vertical universalization. Meaning it doesn't extend those fundamental protections like EPF or ESI to all workers within existing traditional jobs, especially those in micro and very small businesses that employ fewer than those thresholds.
Right. So the smallest businesses might still be outside the main net for things like PF and ESI.
Exactly. So it's a massive step forward, definitely, but it's not yet a completely universal umbrella for every single worker in every single company.
That's a crucial distinction. A step in the right direction, expanding the reach, but not quite a full universal umbrella for all small businesses yet. How quickly is all this rolling out across the country? Is it fully implemented? Are we still in a transition phase?
Unfortunately, no, it's not yet fully implemented. And that's a key feature of its design, a phased commencement. Section 1.3 of the code lets the central government basically switch on different parts of the law at different times through official notifications.
Okay, so piece by piece.
Precisely. Even though it got presidential assent back in September 2020, the main parts, the substantive provisions, they depend on the framing of corresponding rules. And these rules need to be formulated by both the central government and individual state and union territory governments.
Why both?
Because labor is on the concurrent list in our Constitution, meaning both center and states have legislative power. Now, the central government has published its draft rules. There are central rules from 2020 and specific ones for employee compensation from 2021. However, progress at the state level.
Well, it's been uneven.
Okay, some states are faster than others. Exactly. Some key states haven't finished their rulemaking process yet. This leads to delays and a kind of fragmented implementation landscape. And that poses a significant bottleneck, creates uncertainty for businesses operating across India, and it risks undermining that goal of a simple, unified national framework.
So ease of doing business and worker protection both get complicated if states aren't aligned.
Absolutely. Until all states notify their rules, the full vision of the code remains somewhat on hold. Hashtag tag who is covered, redefining worker in modern India.
Okay, one of the biggest shifts that's generated a lot of buzz, a lot of discussion, is how this code redefines who an employee or worker actually is. This sounds pretty fundamental. What does this mean for people listening in, whether they're working traditionally or, in newer ways?
This is where it gets truly transformative, I think. What's fascinating is how much broader the key definitions have become, reflecting how work itself is evolving in India. The term employee in Section 226, it's much wider now than it used to be. It explicitly includes not just your permanent and probationary staff, but also contractual workers, fixed-term employees, even self-employed individuals, and most critically, gig workers and platform workers.
Finally, that's huge.
It marks a landmark change for India, yes, bringing many previously sort of unaddressed categories under a legal Social Security framework for the first time. For decades, many workers just fell into these gray areas lacking formal protections. This code makes a deliberate effort to actually define them and include them.
Gig and platform workers finally have a legal definition and a pathway to Social Security. That's absolutely huge and so relevant to our daily lives now. Could you elaborate a bit more on these specific new categories? Why is their inclusion such a big deal?
Absolutely. The code provides the first ever statutory definitions for these work arrangements, which have exploded in India's platform economy, but previously existed in a kind of legal vacuum.
Right. No clear rules.
Exactly. So this is crucial because it formalizes their existence and creates a framework, even if it's different from traditional employment, for their protection. Let's break them down. Expert speaker. First, gig workers. Section 235. These are folks who perform work or participate in work arrangements outside of traditional employer-employee relationship. They earn from those activities. Host speaker. Like freelancers. Expert speaker. Precisely. Think of a freelance software developer doing project work for multiple clients, or a content creator, a consultant. Their work is often flexible, project-based, not tied to one long-term employer. The code recognizes this distinct way of working. Expert speaker. Then you have platform workers. Section 261. These are people engaged in platform work, basically using online platforms, apps, websites to connect with organizations or individuals for specific services in exchange for payment. Host speaker. So are ride-sharing drivers, food delivery people, expert speaker. Exactly the ones. Or even home service providers booked through an app. Before this, they were often just seen as independent contractors with little or no social security. Expert speaker. And related to that, aggregators. Section 2.2. These are the digital intermediaries, the marketplaces, the companies behind those apps. Expert speaker. They connect the buyer or user with the seller or service provider. Now, they have specific responsibilities under the code. Host speaker. So the platforms themselves have obligations now. Expert speaker. Yes, particularly concerning contributions for gig and platform workers. This is a critical step, making sure the platforms benefiting also contribute to worker welfare. Expert speaker. Next, fixed-term employment, Section 234. This means engaging an employee based on a written contract for a set period. Expert speaker. And here the code introduces really important purity. It explicitly mandates that these employees get all statutory benefits, like gratuity on a pro rata basis. Host speaker. Pro rata, meaning expert speaker, meaning proportionate to their service period. Even if they don't complete the standard qualifying period, like the usual 5 years for gratuity. Host speaker. That's a game changer, because companies used to hire people for, say, 4 years and 11 months. Expert speaker. Exactly. To avoid paying gratuity. Now, that loophole is closed. Their wages, allowances, benefits cannot be less than a permanent employee doing similar work. Ensures fairness, reduces that incentive for disguised employment. Expert speaker. We also have interstate migrant worker. The definition here is broadened significantly too. Expert speaker. It now includes not just workers recruited by an employer in one state for a job in another, but also those who migrate on their own and find work. Host speaker. That reflects the reality of migration much better. Expert speaker? It does. Crucial given the massive internal migration in India. There's also a wage ceiling, 18,000 plus per month or higher if notified, expanding their protection. Expert speaker. This means their Social Security benefits can potentially travel with them, offering a much-needed safety net regardless of where they are. Expert speaker. And finally, unorganized workers, Section 286. This is a broad sort of catch-all category. It includes home-based workers, self-employed people, casual wage workers who aren't covered by other specific chapters of the code. Expert speaker. It even includes workers in the organized sector who fall outside certain other laws. The definition aims to capture that vast informal workforce, giving a legal basis to extend Social Security benefits to them.
This truly brings so many new people into the Social Security fold, at least definitionally, which is fantastic. But I've also heard whispers, maybe more than whispers, about a new definition of wages that could impact everyone's take-home pay or employer costs, often called the 50% proviso. What exactly is this, and how big of a deal is it, really?
Yeah, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. And yes, it's arguably one of the most significant changes with potentially huge consequences for salary structures and costs across the board. The code introduces a uniform definition of wages under Section 288. Now, this definition is structured in 3 parts. First, an inclusionary part. What is definitely wages? Primarily basic pay, dearness allowance, DA, and retaining allowance.
Like a core component.
Exactly. Second, an exclusionary part. Things that are not typically counted as wages, like house rent allowance, HRA, conveyance allowance, overtime, employer contributions to PF pension.
Right, the extras.
Now, the crucial bit is the third part, the 50% proviso. It basically says if the sum of all those excluded components, the HRA, conveyance, overtime, etc., adds up to more than 50% of the employee's total remuneration.
More than half the total pay package.
Yes. Then the amount in excess of that 50% threshold gets added back into the wages for calculation purposes. It's deemed remuneration.
Whoa. Okay, so if my allowances combined are, say, 60% of my total salary, then that extra 10% gets treated as wages.
Precisely.
What's the practical impact of that? For my Provident Fund contributions, my gratuity payout?
Exactly. This is a pivotal shift. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this definition essentially forces a potential restructuring of salary components for many, many companies. Historically, it was quite common, especially in the private sector, to structure salaries with a low basic pay, maybe only 30-40% of the total pay, and then have a really high proportion of allowances. This was often a strategic move to minimize statutory liabilities.
Because PF, ESI, gratuity were linked to basic pay.
Correct. They were typically calculated based on that lower basic pay figure. Now, to comply with the code, companies must ensure that wages, the basic plus DA plus retaining allowance, make up at least 50% of an employee's total remuneration. So if a company's current structure has allowances exceeding 50%, they'll have to reevaluate, maybe increase the basic pay component.
And that directly impacts calculations.
Directly. It increases the base on which EPF contributions are calculated. So higher contributions from both employer and employee. ESI calculations will be higher. And crucially, gratuity accruals will also be higher because that's often linked to last drawn wages.
So for employers, that means higher costs. Potentially significantly higher.
Yes, a significant rise in compliance costs and their financial provisioning liabilities for things like gratuity.
And for us employees, what does it mean for our take-home pay?
It's a bit of a mixed bag for employees. In the short term, you might actually see a slight reduction in your net take-home pay.
Because more is being deducted for PF.
Exactly. A larger chunk of your salary becomes subject to those mandatory deductions. However, the flip side is, it significantly increases your mandatory savings. Your retirement corpus in your PF account grows faster. And you're guaranteed a larger gratuity payment when you leave service after the qualifying period.
So less cash in hand now, but a stronger safety net for the future.
That's the trade-off. It's a move by the government to formalize employment more effectively and ensure these benefits are based on a more realistic picture of a worker's total earnings, not just a manipulated basic pay figure.
That's a huge underlying change impacting potentially everyone's salary slip. Okay, now let's talk about the actual benefits themselves. What are the main Social Security schemes this code modifies or introduces, especially for those in the organized sector? How do they impact us day to day?
Right. The code primarily carries forward and streamlines several established schemes, bringing them under this one umbrella. But yes, it also introduces some crucial updates. Expert speaker. Let's start with the Employees Provident Fund, EPF scheme. Chapter 3. This is really the cornerstone of retirement savings for many in India. Expert speaker. It continues to apply to establishments with 20 or more employees. That threshold is maintained from the old act. Host speaker. Okay, same threshold. Expert speaker, yes. The contribution rate is typically 10% of wages from both the employer and the employee, though there's a provision allowing the central government to potentially increase it to 12% later, depending on economic conditions. Expert speaker. An interesting new flexibility, though, is that establishments below this 20-employee threshold can now voluntarily opt in. Host speaker. Oh, really? How? Expert speaker. If there's mutual agreement between the employer and the majority of the workforce, this lets smaller businesses offer this important benefit if they choose to. Expert speaker.
The scheme is administered, as before, by the Central Board of Trustees, EPF, a well-established body managing these vast funds, ensuring professional management for your retirement savings. Expert speaker. Next, Employees State Insurance, ESI, Chapter 4. ESI provides those essential medical and cash benefits. Expert speaker. This generally applies to establishments with 10 or more employees. Expert speaker. However, and this is a crucial expansion of the safety net, Section 1.4 says it also applies to any number of employees, even just one, in industries notified as hazardous or life-threatening. Host speaker. Wow, okay, so even one person in a dangerous factory get ESI cover. Expert speaker. Exactly. That's a significant strengthening for vulnerable workers. Expert speaker. The benefits are quite comprehensive. Free medical care, not just for the employee, but also their family. Cash benefits during sickness or maternity. Coverage for disablement from workplace injury, and even dependent benefits if an employer dies. Funeral expenses, too. Host speaker. That's quite a package. Expert speaker. It is.
And a notable shift in this code is that the ESIC, the Employees State Insurance Corporation that runs this, can now enter into public-private partnerships for healthcare delivery. Host speaker. What does that mean? Using private hospitals. Expert speaker. Potentially, yes. It could expand access to medical facilities, maybe in areas where ESI doesn't have its own hospitals, by leveraging private sector capacity. Expert speaker. Currently, the employer contribution is around 3.25% of wages, and the employee contributes 0.75%.
So even a single employee in a hazardous industry is now covered by ESI. That's a really significant move. What about gratuity, that lump sum for long service and maternity benefits for working mothers? Any major changes there?
Indeed, that specific ESI provision is a key enhancement. And yes, the code brings important updates for gratuity and maternity benefits too. Expert speaker. For gratuity, Chapter 5. This applies to factories, mines, plantations, and shops with 10 or more workers. Expert speaker. Traditionally, as you know, eligibility required 5 years of continuous service. Expert speaker. However, for fixed-term employees, as we discussed earlier, Section 53 makes a landmark change. It explicitly waives this 5-year condition for them. Host speaker. The pro rata thing again. Expert speaker. Exactly. They are now eligible for pro rata gratuity when their contract expires, no matter how long the contract was. Expert speaker. This fundamentally alters gratuity. It's not just a loyalty bonus anymore for long stayers. It's an earned benefit that accrues each year for fixed-term workers. Host speaker. That puts a new liability on employers using fixed-term staff. Expert speaker? Absolutely. Especially in sectors relying heavily on project-based or fixed-term hiring. It closes that significant loophole. Expert speaker. Oh, and working journalists also get a special provision. Their eligibility period for gratuity is reduced to 3 years. Expert speaker. Now, maternity benefits. Chapter 6. This applies to factories, mines, plantations, and shops with 10 or more women workers. Expert speaker. It provides 26 weeks of paid leave for the first 2 children. It's quite generous, actually, by international standards. Host speaker. 26 weeks, right? Expert speaker, yes. And for subsequent children, or if someone adopts or uses a surrogate, commissioning mothers, it's 12 weeks of paid leave. Expert speaker. A really key provision, carried forward but reinforced by the draft rules, is the creche facility requirement. Employers with 50 or more women employees must provide a creche. Host speaker. Okay, 50 women employees is the threshold.
Expert speaker.
Yes. And what's even more progressive, recognizing hybrid work models, is that these creche facilities must be accessible even to women working from home. Host speaker. That's actually very forward-thinking. Expert speaker. It is. A huge step towards supporting women's workforce participation. Expert speak. There's also a medical bonus of 3,500 size, or as notified, if the employer doesn't offer free prenatal or postnatal care. Expert speaker. One procedural change. For revealing these benefits, Aadhaar is now mandatory for identity verification, aimed at streamlining and preventing fraud. Host speaker. Makes sense. Expert speaker. And the code also formalizes the option for an employer to allow a woman to work from home after her maternity leave based on mutual agreement. Adds crucial flexibility.
Those are indeed significant updates for the traditional workforce, especially helping fixed-term employees and working mothers. But the really new ground this code breaks is for our unorganized, gig, and platform workers. They're such a huge part of India's economy now. How does it actually address their social security, given their, unique work arrangements?
This is where the code steps into truly uncharted territory for India. And it's a landmark recognition, really. For the first time, Chapter 9 of the Code formally defines these categories and mandates a framework for their Social Security. It's what lawyers might call a sui generis legal category unique. It's a safety net funded jointly by the state and the aggregators.
The platform.
Yes, but it doesn't necessarily provide the full suite of rights that traditional employees get. It's a specific, tailored framework. Expert speaker. First step. Registration, Section 113. Every unorganized gig or platform worker has to register themselves. Host speaker, how? Expert speaker. Through a dedicated online portal or maybe a self-declaration process. Details are still emerging. Expert speaker. Crucially, Aadhaar seeding is mandatory for all these accounts. Host speaker, why? Aadhaar. Expert speaker. To establish a robust identity for each worker and, very importantly, to enable portability of benefits. Expert speaker. So your Social Security record can be tracked even if you switch platforms, move cities, change your work type. Expert speaker. Second, schemes. Section 114. The central government is empowered to actually frame and notify specific Social Security schemes for these workers. Expert speaker. These schemes are intended to cover critical areas, life and disability insurance, accident cover, health and maternity benefits, old age pension, creche facilities. Host speaker. So the code sets the stage, but the actual benefits depend on future schemes being launched. Expert speaker. Exactly. The successful materialization of these benefits hinges on the actual formulation and notification of these schemes by the government. The framework is there, but the specifics are still being worked out. Expert speaker. Third, funding. This is perhaps the most novel aspect, how it's paid for. Expert speaker. Funding can come from multiple sources: central government contributions, state government contributions, contributions from aggregators. Host speaker. The platform's paying in. Expert speaker, yes. And even corporate social responsibility, CSR. And funds. Expert speaker. A key provision is that aggregators will contribute 1-2% of their annual turnover for each category of worker. Expert speaker. But there's a cap. It can't exceed 5% of the total payments made to those gig and platform workers. Host speaker. Okay, so a percentage is turnover, but capped based on payouts. Expert speaker. Correct. This ensures the businesses benefiting from this flexible workforce also contribute to their welfare, not just shifting the burden onto the state or the workers. Expert speaker. Fourth, oversight. A National Social Security Board, set up under Section 6, is designated to oversee these schemes. Expert speaker. What's interesting is its composition gets specifically modified when discussing gig and platform worker matters. Expert speaker. It will include 5 representatives each from aggregators and gig platform workers. Host speaker. So they got a direct say. Expert speaker. Exactly. Ensures their voices are heard in policy decisions and scheme design. Vital for creating relevant programs. Expert speaker. And finally, cessation of benefits. A worker's registration ends under specific conditions when they turn 60, or if they haven't been actively engaged with an aggregator for at least 90 days in the preceding year. Host speaker. To ensure benefits go to active workers. Expert speaker. Precisely. And aggregators have to share worker data periodically, often monthly, with the government portal. This helps ensure correct benefit distribution and monitors who is actively engaged.
So it really acknowledges the reality of the platform economy, creating this separate, innovative, almost hybrid framework for their benefits. A massive policy shift, indeed. Now, let's not forget another huge segment. Our building and construction workers. What does this code mean for them? They're everywhere.
Indeed, their welfare is absolutely crucial. They form one of the largest and frankly most vulnerable segments of India's workforce. Chapter 8 of the Code specifically carries forward and unifies provisions for building and other construction workers, BOCW. It continues the mechanism of the old BOCW Cess Act from 1996, which is now repealed, but brings some enhancements. Expert speaker. State building workers' welfare boards, Section 7. Each state and union territory must constitute such a board, chaired by a government nominee. Expert speaker. These boards manage the welfare funds specifically for construction workers. They have a tripartite composition government, employers, workers ensuring stakeholder involvement, and crucially, must include at least one woman member. Host speaker. Okay, state-level boards manage the funds. Expert speaker. Funding. How are these funds financed? Through a cess, a special tax levied on employers. Expert speaker. It's calculated as a percentage of the cost of the construction work. Employers have to self-assess this cess and pay it. The draft rules provide a detailed procedure for this collection. Host speaker. So, a tax on construction projects funds worker welfare. Expert speaker. Benefits. What do registered construction workers get? A range of things. Death and disability benefits. A pension at age 60, which becomes more standardized now. Host speaker. Pension at 60. That's important. Expert speaker. Very. Also, maternity benefits, education or skill development schemes for their families. Medical aid. They can also get transit accommodation or hostel facilities, vital for mobile workforce. Expert speaker. Eligibility and registration. Who can register? Workers between 18 and 60 engaged in construction work for at least 90 days in the preceding year. Expert speaker. Again, Aadhaar seeding is mandatory for registration. For accurate records, prevent duplication. Expert speaker. Portability. This is a major reform for migrant construction workers. Significantly, if a building worker migrates from one state to another. Host speaker, which happens all the time. Expert speaker. Constantly. They are now entitled to get benefits from the welfare board in the state where they're currently working. Host speaker. So that the benefits travel with them. That's huge. Expert speaker. Absolutely. A massive relief for a population that often struggle to access benefits outside their home state. Expert speaker. Exclusions. However, it's important to note, certain construction works are excluded from this specific cess and benefits scheme. Expert speaker. Like work related to factories or mines, covered by other laws, or projects employing fewer than 10 workers in the past year. Expert speaker. Also, residential construction for individual use costing less than 50 lakhs is typically excluded. The focus is more on larger commercial projects for funding.
Okay, it sounds like an enormous amount of administrative machinery is needed to run all these different schemes effectively, especially given the sheer scale of India's workforce. Who are the key players, institutions that actually govern this code and make sure it works on the ground?
You're absolutely right. It requires a sophisticated, multi-tier institutional framework. And the code, under Section 279, spells this out quite clearly. It's designed for broad representation and, hopefully, efficient management. Expert speaker. First, the Central Board of Trustees, EPF, Section 4. This is essentially a continuation of the previous EPF board. It's a body corporate responsible for managing the massive EPF and pension schemes. Expert speaker. Headed by a chairperson and vice chair appointed by the center, it includes reps from ministries, state governments, and crucially, 10 representatives each from employers and employees. That tripartite structure ensures stakeholder input. Host speaker. So the PF board continues, basically. Expert speaker, yes. Similarly, the Employee State Insurance Corporation, ESIC, Section 5, also a corporate entity running the ESI schemes and its network of hospitals and dispensaries. Expert speaker. Its governing structure is also tripartite. Central chair, vice chair, state reps, 10 employer reps, 10 employee reps, plus medical practitioners and MPs. Broad oversight for health and social security benefits. It has a director general and financial commissioner for daily operations. Host speaker. Okay, ESIC also continues with similar governance. Expert speaker. Then there's the National Social Security Board, Section 6. This is a crucial advisory and monitoring body. Expert speaker. Chaired by the Union Labor Minister, with the Labor Secretary as vice chair. It includes up to 40 members nominated by the center representing unorganized workers, employers, NGOs, MPs, ministries, states. Host speaker. So its focus is broader. Unorganized sector. Expert speaker. Primarily, yes. Its main role is advising on and monitoring schemes for unorganized workers, and importantly, gig and platform workers. It can recommend new schemes. Expert speaker. State-level boards also exist with similar functions locally. Expert speaker. And remember, when the National Board discusses gig platform worker issues, its composition changes to include 5 reps each from aggregators and workers. Host speaker. Giving them that direct voice again. Expert speaker. And finally, the State Building and Construction Workers Welfare Boards, Section 7. As we mentioned, each state sets these up, chaired by a government nominee, managing the cess funds and benefits specifically for construction workers locally.
That's a lot of boards and committees, all designed, hopefully, for robust oversight and fair representation. But how does all this translate to, on-the-ground enforcement and compliance, getting businesses to actually follow the rules? And what's this really interesting new role I read about, an inspector cum facilitator? What's that about?
Ah, yes, the inspector cum facilitator. This represents a key philosophical shift in the code's enforcement approach. It's moving away from a purely punitive model towards one of compliance through facilitation.
Facilitation? How so?
Well, traditionally, labor inspectors were often seen primarily as enforcers. Sometimes this led to an adversarial relationship with employers, maybe even allegations of corruption, the Inspector Raj fear. The new cadre of inspector cum facilitators, Section 122, operating at the district level, are meant to be not just enforcers, but also guides. Their role is explicitly expanded. Beyond just inspection and finding faults, they are supposed to advise employers and employees on how to achieve compliance with the code.
So help them understand and follow the law.
Exactly. That's the idea. They still have powers. They inspect workplaces, examine people, demand registers, seize evidence if needed. But their primary mandate is framed as educating and supporting, acting more like a government guide or advisor. This new role is also complemented by a mandatory web-based inspection scheme.
Web-based.
Yes, aiming for more transparency, possibly randomized inspections, with electronic uploading of reports. The idea is to reduce arbitrariness and foster a more cooperative compliance environment.
That sounds much more approachable, doesn't it? Like having someone help you understand the rules rather than just waiting to catch you out. But what are the concrete, strict compliance requirements for employers under this new code? What do businesses actually need to do differently now?
Right, despite the facilitation angle, employers do face several key obligations. These are mostly designed to streamline, digitize, and ensure greater transparency and accountability. Expert speaker. First, registration. Any establishment covered by the code must register online. This is done via the Shram Suvita portal. Host speaker. Shram Suvita. Okay, a single portal. Expert speaker. That's the goal. A single window for various labor compliances. The draft rules. Rule 5 detail the electronic form, needing identity details, PAN number. Expert speaker. An auto-generated registration certificate should ideally be issued within 7 days, speeding things up. Expert speaker. Importantly, existing registrations under the old laws need to be updated and unified under this new system. Expert speaker. The code also tackles dormant registrations. They expire after 24 months of inactivity, and providing misinformation can lead to cancellation after a notice. Expert speaker. Employers have to quote this registration number on all code-related documents and update any changes in their establishment details within 30 days. Expert speaker. Second, records of reporting. The emphasis here is heavily on digitization. Electronic records are key. Expert speaker. Employers must maintain detailed electronic registers covering many aspects. Employee attendance, wages paid, work hours, overtime, leaves, muster rolls, identity numbers like Aadhaar, accident details, compensation paid, statutory deductions, cess paid for construction, even vacancy status. Host speaker. That's a lot of data to maintain electronically. Expert speaker. It is. They also need to display notices, issue wage slips, and file periodic electronic returns. Expert speaker. A key reform here is the move towards unified annual returns for EPF, ESI, etc., aiming to simplify compliance by replacing multiple forms with maybe just one comprehensive one. Expert speaker. Public sector units often have even more rigorous record-keeping rules. Expert speaker. Third, prohibition on wage reduction. Section 124. This is a very important protective measure. Expert speaker. The code explicitly forbids employers from reducing an employee's wage or benefits just because the employer now has to make Social Security contributions. Host speaker. So they can't pass the cost onto the worker by cutting pay elsewhere. Expert speaker. Correct.
It ensures the employer's contribution burden isn't unfairly shifted. Expert speaker. Fourth, opt-in, opt-out, sections 1.5 to 7. While the default thresholds for EPF 20 employees and ESI 10 employees remain, there's some new flexibility. Expert speaker. An establishment below the threshold can choose to opt in early for EPF or ESI coverage if the employer and the majority of workers agree. Host speaker. Proactive coverage. Okay. Expert speaker. Yes. Conversely, after being covered for at least 5 years, an employer can apply to opt out of certain schemes. Again, needs workforce consent, but only if all past dues are cleared and returns are filed. The draft rules mention a portal-based process for this. Expert speaker. And fifth, exemptions. Section 143, Rule 60. The government can exempt establishments from some provisions if they offer substantially similar or superior benefits through their own private funds or schemes. Host speaker. So companies with good private schemes can be exempted. Expert speaker. In theory, yes, but the criteria for getting these exemptions are quite strict. Expert speaker.
You need at least 3 years of continuous compliance under the old laws, no defaults, 500 plus employees members, majority employee consent for PF, positive net worth for 3 years, mandatory Aadhaar seeding, and online claim portals linked to EPFO systems. Host speaker. Wow, that's a high bar. Expert speaker. It is. The final decision rests with the EPF board or ESIC. These tough conditions suggest the government prefers statutory coverage, making private exemptions a challenging path.
It sounds like a lot of work for employers, definitely, even with the inspector cum facilitator trying to help. What happens if there is a dispute or non-compliance? Are there new rules for penalties? How does the recovery process work now?
Yes. The code aims to streamline assessment and recovery, while also introducing a more nuanced approach to penalties, balancing deterrence with facilitation. Expert speaker. Assessment and recovery of dues. Authorized officers are empowered to conduct inquiries and determine the Social Security dues owed by an employer. Expert speaker. A major relief for employers, and a significant change, is the introduction of a 5-year limitation period, Section 125, for initiating these inquiries for EPF and ESI dues. Host speaker. Only 5 years back. That's huge. Expert speaker. It is. Previously, claims could potentially stretch back much further, causing immense uncertainty for businesses. This 5-year limit provides much-needed certainty. Businesses can close their books on older liabilities. Expert speaker. Appeals. If an employer disputes an assessment order for EPF or ESI dues, they can appeal to the industrial tribunal. Expert speaker. A new measure in the draft rules, though, is a pre-deposit requirement of 25% of the assessed amount before an employer can file such an appeal. Host speaker. Pay 25% up front to appeal. Expert speaker. Yes. It's a mechanism intended to curb frivolous litigation, ensuring only serious challenges proceed. Expert speaker. Higher courts, like high courts, handle appeals on questions of law in employee compensation cases. For ESI disputes, there are specific employees' insurance courts. Expert speaker. Offenses and penalties. Penalties for non-compliance have generally been enhanced and rationalized. Expert speaker. For example, failing to deposit an employee's PF contribution after deducting it from their salary, that's now a serious offense. Minimum 1 year imprisonment and a 1 lakh fine. Host speaker. A strong deterrent against misusing employee money. Expert speaker. Exactly. Other general penalties apply for things like obstructing an inspector or filing false returns. Expert speaker. Prior opportunities, Section 137. This is a key procedural reform aligning with that facilitation philosophy. Expert speaker. For first-time offenses, the inspector-cum-facilitator must give the employer a written opportunity to fix the noncompliance within a specific period before starting prosecution. Host speaker. A chance to correct the mistake first. Expert speaker. Yes. If compliance is achieved within that period, no prosecution is initiated. It encourages fixing the problem over immediate punishment. Expert speaker. Compounding of offenses, Section 138. For certain first-time offenses, specifically those punishable only with a fine or with imprisonment up to 1 year plus a fine, the employer can choose to settle. Host speaker. Settle how? Expert speaker. By paying a specified amount, like 50% of the maximum possible fine. This process, called compounding, allows employers to avoid lengthy, costly criminal prosecution for relatively minor violations. Offers a faster resolution. Expert speaker. Financial accountability. To ensure good governance, the Social Security organizations, like EPFO, ESIC, can invest surplus funds following government rules. Expert speaker. Their accounts are audited annually by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, CAG. Any irregularities found must be remedied within 90 days. Expert speaker. Plus, the central government has the power to defer or reduce EPCI contributions for both employer and employee for up to 3 months during extraordinary times, like a pandemic or natural disaster. Provides crucial flexibility during crises.
Okay, this code is undoubtedly comprehensive, incredibly ambitious. It's aiming to transform Social Security in India, but transforming legal text into real-world impact, especially in a country as vast and diverse as ours. Well, that often comes with formidable hurdles. What are some of the biggest challenges that analysts and policymakers are pointing out for its successful implementation?
That's a critical question, yes. It's essential to look beyond the law on paper to the practicalities on the ground. While the code is progressive, well-intentioned, several significant implementation challenges could indeed slow down or impede its transformative potential. Expert speaker. First, awareness and capacity. This is perhaps the most fundamental challenge. Just spreading awareness among millions of small employers, informal workers, the vast unorganized sector, it's a monumental task. Host speaker. How do you even reach everyone? Expert speaker. Exactly. Many informal workers might not even know they're eligible to register or how to claim benefits, especially given varying levels of digital literacy, particularly outside urban centers. Expert speaker. Employers, too, especially those running MSMEs, need to understand these complex new definitions, the wage restructuring implications, the compliance requirements. It's a steep learning curve, potentially requiring extensive support and outreach. Imagine explaining the 50% wage proviso to a small shopkeeper used to cash wages. Expert speaker. Second, technical infrastructure. The code relies heavily on online systems. The Shram Savita portal, a dedicated unorganized workers registration portal, mandatory Aadhaar seeding, aggregated reporting mechanisms. Host speaker. A lot of digital plumbing needed. Expert speaker. A huge amount. Establishing, debugging, maintaining these robust platforms, ensuring they work reliably, especially in rural areas with limited internet or digital literacy that takes substantial time, investment, and continuous effort. Expert speaker. Delays in launching or stabilizing these portals could significantly postpone coverage for millions, leading to frustration and eroding trust in the system. Expert speaker. Third, coordination with states. This is a huge one. Remember, labor is on the concurrent list. Expert speaker. Many critical provisions like setting up state welfare boards, finalizing specific schemes for gig workers, collecting the BOCWS requires specific notifications and rulemaking by individual state and UT governments. Host speaker. So if states drag their feet, expert speaker, then implementation becomes uneven, fragmented across India. This undermines the whole goal of a unified national framework. It creates immense challenges for businesses operating pan-India. You might have different rules applying in different states, defeating the purpose of simplification. Expert speaker. Fourth, funding uncertainties. While aggregator contributions are mandated, 1 to 2% of turnover, capped at 5% of payouts, the actual nitty-gritty of collection, enforcement, ensuring consistent compliance, this still needs robust rules and monitoring. Host speaker. Could platforms push back? Expert speaker. There could be resistance, maybe attempts at evasion. They might see it as a new cost burden. Expert speaker. Furthermore, financing really expansive coverage, like pensions for all unorganized workers, could seriously strain state budgets, especially for poorer states. This needs clear rollout plans and consistent financial commitment from both center and states. The long-term sustainability of these funds is a critical question mark. Expert speaker. Fifth, exemption complexities. As we noted, the process for getting exemptions is quite tough. Large size, long compliance history, tech readiness needed. Expert speaker. This might discourage many employers from even trying to opt out. Making statutory compliance the default may be the only practical option, even if it's costlier. The stringency aims to prevent loopholes, but could be seen as burdensome. Expert speaker. Sixth, transition legacy issues. Reconciling all the existing trusts and funds from the previous 9 laws, think of large PSU provident funds. Existing small EPF trusts with this new unified framework is a massive administrative headache. Host speaker. Aligning decades of old records. Expert speaker. Exactly. Aligning old accounts, transferring balances of previously exempted funds back into the statutory schemes, as Section 1433 requires, it's legally and logistically complex, prone to delays and errors. The code allows a 1-year overlap for continuity, but the actual task is huge. Expert speaker. And 7th, enforcement capacity. That new cadre of inspector-cum-facilitators, they need to be recruited, trained effectively in both enforcement and facilitation, and deployed at scale across all districts. Host speaker, it's a massive HR exercise. Expert speaker, it is. If staffing isn't adequate or training isn't sufficient, monitoring compliance, especially for small or remote employers, could remain weak. The success of the facilitation model really hinges on these individuals having the right skills, resources, and mindset.
So, wrapping this up, what does all this truly mean for the average person listening? For businesses, it clearly sounds like higher compliance costs, maybe significant ones, and a massive learning curve. And for workers, perhaps potential short-term adjustments in take-home pay, even if the long-term benefits are definitely designed to be better. Is that a fair summary?
Precisely. I think that captures the essence. The code unequivocally aims for greater worker protection and formalization. It's steering India towards a more comprehensive, digitized social safety net. However, its ultimate success, its real-world impact, will depend critically on clear, harmonized rules across all states, robust and user-friendly IT systems, continuous capacity building for everyone involved, employers, workers, government officials, and strong, coordinated action between the central and state governments. It's a delicate, ongoing balancing act, balancing robust worker welfare with maintaining the economic viability and ease of doing business for enterprises as they adapt to these significant, multifaceted changes. Employers, as many analysts caution, are indeed facing higher costs and complexity, and workers might see those short-term pay adjustments even as their long-term Social Security benefits are set to significantly improve. It's definitely a journey, not a destination, for India's entire labor landscape. #outro.
Wow. That truly was a deep dive into India's code on Social Security 2020. We've covered its massive ambition, the expanded definitions bringing gig and platform workers into the fold, the key schemes forming the pillars of protection, the elaborate institutional framework governing it all, and importantly, the very real complex challenges of rolling out such an ambitious law across our diverse nation.
Indeed. We've seen how this code attempts to modernize, to unify Social Security in India, aiming to provide that much-needed safety net for millions previously left out or only partially covered. The move towards digital registration, mandatory Aadhaar seeding, those novel funding mechanisms, including aggregator contributions, it really marks a significant shift in thinking about worker protection in the 21st century.
It's absolutely fascinating, isn't it, how a single comprehensive piece of legislation can attempt to reshape so much of our working lives, our economic future, from ensuring fair gratuity for fixed-term employees to comprehensive maternity benefits, and now even recognizing our delivery heroes with a path to Social Security. The ambition to formalize and protect India's vast workforce is abundantly clear.
Absolutely. But, as we've discussed, the journey from that legislative intent to effective on-ground impact is always complex, especially in a country of India's scale and diversity. This deep dive, hopefully, has highlighted the intricate details of the code and its draft rules. These details will be absolutely crucial for effective implementation and for ensuring that the promised benefits truly reach every eligible worker, from the factory floor to the digital platform.
So what does this all mean for you listening in? It means staying informed. It means understanding your evolving rights and obligations, whether you're an employee, an employer, or working in the gig economy. And it means recognizing the monumental, ongoing effort underway to build a more secure and equitable future for India's workforce. It's about being aware of this sort of silent revolution happening in social protection. And on that thought, maybe we leave you with this to ponder. As India continues its rapid march towards an increasingly digital, often more informal economy, how do we ensure that our social security frameworks not only keep pace with these changes, but actively anticipate them, and do so without inadvertently stifling the very innovation and growth that drive our nation forward?
That's $1 million question, isn't it?
Something to mull over. That's it for this edition of The Deep Dive. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back soon with another stack of sources to unpack, bringing you the knowledge you need to stay well informed.